this is Bob Proctor, and I want to welcome you to session number 2 of the Lead the Field seminar, Greener Pastures. Earl began by saying, in the year 1843, a man was born who, during his lifetime, was to have a profound effect on millions of people. He became a lawyer, then a newspaper editor, and finally, a clergyman. It was during his church career that an incident occurred which was to change his life and the lives of countless others. One day a group of boys came to Dr. Conwell at his church and asked him if he would be willing to instruct them in college courses. They wanted a college education, but lacked the money to pay for it. He told them he would do all he could, and as the boys left, a thought, an idea began to form in Dr. Conwell's mind. He asked himself, why couldn't there be a fine college for poor but deserving young men? Well, here was a great idea, and he went to work on it at once. Almost single-handedly, Dr. Conwell raised $7 million with which he founded one of the world's leading universities. He raised the money by giving more than 6,000 lectures all over the country. And in each one of them, he told the story called Acres of Diamonds. This was a true story which had affected him very deeply, just as it affected his audiences. Before we get into the story of Acres of Diamonds, as Earl shared it with us, there's a tremendous lesson for you and me in what happened and how Dr. Conwell responded to the situation. Everyone has opportunities presented to them frequently throughout their life, but rarely do people recognize and act on them as Dr. Conwell did. Let's look at this from a psychological perspective. A group of boys approached Dr. Conwell and made a request with respect to their education. That request caused Dr. Conwell to recognize a problem and at the same time enabled him to see a tremendous opportunity which he immediately acted upon. Now, we'll review the opportunity and his actions at another point in Earl's message. The graphic illustration that you see throughout your management guide of the stick person will help us recognize how most people handle situations of this nature and how Dr. Conwell responded. Visualize the stick person for a moment and then try and understand that a clear 97% of our population permit the results in their lives to control their thinking. They let their sensory factors pick up the results control their thoughts, the thoughts control their feelings, the feelings control their actions, and they produce more results exactly the same as the ones they're trying to get rid of. Conversely, you and I could do exactly what Dr. Conwell did. He took a look at the results, but did not let the results control his thinking. He began to form new thoughts. He saw new results in his conscious mind. He got emotionally involved with them and then acted on them. You see, a clear 97% of our population, when presented with situations similar to Dr. Conwell's when he met with the boys, would pass it off by looking at the situation and then saying there's not too much you can do about it. There isn't a school for boys in your situation. However, that's not how Dr. Conwell responded. He recognized a problem, turned it into an opportunity because he realized that present results are nothing but the manifestation of our past thoughts and actions. Dr. Conwell originated a new series of thoughts, developed a strategy to take advantage of the opportunity, and went to work. Now let's get back to Earl Nightingale's narration of this message. He said, the story was an account of an African farmer who heard tales about other settlers who had made millions by discovering diamond mines. These tales so excited the farmer that he could hardly wait to sell his farm and search for diamonds himself. So he sold his farm and spent the rest of his life wandering the vast African continent, searching unsuccessfully for the gleaming gems which brought such high prices on the markets of the world. Finally, in a fit of despondency, broke and desperate, as I remember the story, he threw himself in a river and drowned. Meanwhile, the man who had bought his farm one day found a large and unusual stone in a stream which cut through the property. The stone turned out to be a great diamond of enormous value, and he then discovered that the farm was covered with them. It was to become one of the world's richest diamond mines. The first farmer had owned, literally, acres of diamonds, but had sold them for practically nothing in order to look for them elsewhere. If he had only taken the time to study and prepare himself, to learn what diamonds looked like in their rough state, and had first thoroughly explored the land he owned, he would have found the millions he sought right on his own property. The thing about this story that so profoundly affected Dr. Conwell and subsequently millions of others was the idea that each of us is, at this moment, standing in the middle of his own acres of diamonds. If we will only have the wisdom and patience to intelligently and effectively explore the work in which we're now engaged, we'll usually find that it contains the riches we seek, whether they be financial or intangible or both. Before we go running off to what we think are greener pastures, let's make sure that our own is not just as green or perhaps even greener. You see, while we're looking at other pastures, other people are looking at ours. Someone has said, if the other pasture looks greener, maybe it's because it's getting better care. There's nothing more pitiful to my mind than the person who wastes his or her life running from one thing to another, forever looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and never staying with one thing long enough to find it. Now, Earl did an excellent job of sharing that with us, but when I first picked up Lead the Field many years ago, it had a profound effect on my life. My world began to change like night and day. Then I reached a point where I truly wanted to understand why had my life changed. You see, I had given this program to friends and nothing happened to them. They fell into that pitiful group of people that Earl Nightingale referred to, who continually waste their life looking outside of themselves for answers and opportunities. Do you know, Emerson spoke about this. He said, what lies before you and what lies behind you are tiny matters compared to what lies within you. That's a quote I came across in my attempt to find out why I had changed. It helped me to understand that all of our opportunities, as well as our problems, are in our perception of situations, and our perception is controlled by our paradigms. Joel Barker, in his book Paradigms, said, to ignore the power of paradigms to influence your judgment is to put yourself at risk when exploring the future. Paradigms definitely influence our thinking and have the ability, if left unchecked, to control our entire life. Now, as we proceed through the program, we're going to discuss how paradigms are formed and, most importantly, how they're changed. So let's proceed at this point and take a look at some excellent examples that Earl Nightingale gave us of people who did not let their paradigms hold them back. No matter what your goal may be, perhaps the road to it can be found in the very thing in which you're now engaged. It wasn't until he was completely paralyzed and forced to reach into the resources of his mind that a courageous farmer got the idea of producing exceptionally good meat products on his farm. From this idea, one of the country's largest meatpacking companies was born. His farm contained acres of diamonds, too. He had just never seen them before. An insurance man got the idea of going back to all the people in his files and really working with them, serving them the way he felt they should be served. That year, he wrote an additional $700,000 of insurance and joined the $1 Million Roundtable. He found he no longer had to approach cold prospects. By working with the people he had already sold on their referrals, he found acres of diamonds right in his own filing cabinets. You see, it was as I was starting to study this from Earl's perspective that things began to change. And I think before we go any further, I believe it would be a prudent move on your part to pause and think for a moment of what you have just heard. Dr. Conwell was a man with varied experiences. These experiences were obviously a contributing factor to his thinking that enabled him to accomplish what he did. However, if you look back on your own life objectively, you'll realize that you too have had a variety of experiences. And although they may be completely different than Dr. Conwell's, it is your past experiences that you draw on to originate the ideas that will enable you to do great things in the future. Conwell could have easily dismissed the requests of the boys who asked him for special instructions, but he didn't. His mind immediately went beyond the request and recognized a problem. The moment he recognized the problem, he also saw the flip side of the coin and originated a solution to the problem, which, of course, was the opportunity. He didn't stop there. He immediately went to work on the solution by raising money, with which he founded Temple University. Many thousands of people are enjoying a more abundant life because one man, Dr. Russell H. Conwell, looked beyond a problem. It would be difficult to even come close to being accurate in suggesting the good that Dr. Conwell derived from his efforts. However, we know that he had to be richly rewarded, as everything in the universe operates by law, and that what we sow, we must ultimately reap. Permit me to suggest that you follow along the same line of thought and action to improve the quality of your life. Take a moment and outline specific results you're presently getting in an important area of your life. Stop and think about it for a moment. The results in one specific area of your life. Now, stop and think of the obstacle you feel would prevent you from improving those results, let's say by 100%. Well, think about that. Really give it serious thought. Now, the obstacle will represent the problem. When you mentally work your way around to the other side of the problem, you're going to find the opportunity that will enable you to enjoy 100% improvement in your results. That's exactly what Dr. Conwell did. Now, right here, we come to a very important point. When the idea for Temple University first surfaced in the good doctor's mind, it would have been a fantasy, which is the first stage in the creative process. History has recorded that Dr. Conwell took his idea way beyond the fantasy stages. He completed the creative process. Now, as we progress through this program, you're going to become aware of how you can turn your fantasies into results as he did. At this point, I want to suggest that you begin to fantasize. Your fantasy will take you into the future and enable you to see yourself having already accomplished the 100% increase. Clearly understand this is neither foolish nor immature. It is, in fact, a truly creative activity, one which will bring you great enjoyment and lead to tremendous accomplishments. When you get the fantasy clear in your mind, you want to turn it into words. Paint your picture with words. Put it in writing. Van Gogh was asked one time how he did such beautiful work. He said, "I dream my painting, and then I paint my dream." Isn't that beautiful? Now let's go back to Earl Nightingale. Earl began by saying, "A man from a small town amassed a fortune, starting with a single service station. In the beginning, when things were tough, he would ask himself each morning, what can I do to increase my service to my customers?" He's retired now, and his son heads the large, complex enterprise that all started with a small service station and a daily question that will virtually guarantee success in any undertaking. What can I do to increase my service to my customers? Answer that question in constantly new and better ways, and sales and profits will take care of themselves. Why don't you and I do that? Let's ask ourselves that question. What can I do to increase my service to my customers? And let's think of 6 things that we can do, and then put them in writing. Nail them, put them on paper. Earl went on to say, do you know what the so-called average person would have done in the case I just mentioned? Well, they would have been worried about how bad business was, because in the beginning my friend had a hard time just feeding his family. When one day a man drove into his station with a shiny car, the so-called average man, seeing what he presumed to be a wealthy customer, would have said to himself, I ought to be in his business instead of mine. You see, the average person believes some businesses are better than others. Instead of realizing the truth that there are no bad businesses, there are just people who don't know enough to see the opportunity in the work they're in. No matter what our work happens to be, it's our business. We're the manager. If there seems to be no future or opportunity in it, it isn't because it's not there, but perhaps because we can't see it. A farmer once poked a tiny pumpkin into an empty jug. The pumpkin grew until it completely filled the jug and could grow no more. When the farmer broke the glass jug, he had a pumpkin exactly the size and shape of the jug. If we're not careful, each of us can do a similar thing. we can mistakenly poke ourselves into jugs that limit our growth. But it is we who do the poking, not the job, not the company, nor the territory, nor the economy, nor the times. We do it. This is a good point for us to come back to paradigms. Unless your parents fall into a very small select group of individuals who are acutely aware of what is going on and keep their mind tuned into a positive polarity, you were probably poked into a jug before you were born as a result of genetic conditioning. And then, after you were born, this conditioning was reinforced environmentally. You'll remember from the magic word, we explained how the conscious mind had the ability to choose, accept, and reject any thought. It was also explained that the subconscious mind is totally subjective and accepts every idea that is presented to it. Build the image of the stick person in your mind. Now I want you to take the top half and set it aside. Now all we've got is the subconscious mind wide open. That's how a baby arrives on the scene. Their subconscious mind, which has no ability to reject, will accept anything that comes its way. Any idea that is thought of, talked about, or acted upon repeatedly in the presence of the baby will ultimately become fixed in the baby's mind. Fixed ideas are more commonly referred to as habits, and a multitude of habits form a paradigm. At birth, a baby is a linguistic genius. You can literally teach a baby anything. They have no ability to reject information. 97% of the population have been programmed with limitations, and although the people who did the programming, our parents, relatives, neighbors, and guardians, loved us and wanted us to win, they could not give us what they did not have. They did the best they could, and where they may have been responsible for creating the paradigms that are controlling our lives, we are responsible for changing them. Joel Barker, again, from the book Paradigms, said, to be able to shape your future, you have to be ready and able to change your paradigm. Earl helps us with that as he continues. We should avoid such self-restriction and realize there's virtually no limit to our growth and development on the land upon which we now find ourselves, with our roots deep in the soil of a working philosophy of life, such as the one offered in this program, and our minds and bodies in a climate of freedom. People who become outstanding in their work are those who see their work as an opportunity for growth and development, and who prepare themselves for the opportunity which surround them every day. It was J.B. Matthews who wrote, unless a person has trained themselves for their chance, the chance will only make them look ridiculous. A great occasion is worth to a person exactly what their preparation enables them to make of it. How are you enjoying this program up till now? I think it's absolutely incredible. When I first began to study this program, the information that Earl Nightingale was sharing with us rang in my mind as true as anything I had ever heard. I was truly puzzled why so few people grasped the opportunities I was beginning to see everywhere I looked. Looking back today, after decades of experience, it is very obvious why so few people take advantage of the opportunities staring them in the face. Their paradigms blind them to these beautiful truths. The graphic illustrations in your management guide clearly communicate the idea of why paradigms definitely influence our life, influences our thinking, and although there's an unadulterated creative power continuously flowing to and through our consciousness, our paradigms blind us to the opportunity and limit the thoughts we choose to originate. Visualize yourself as that stick person again. See your subconscious mind full of ideas that were fixed there when you were just a little child. As a matter of fact, they began to become fixed in there at the moment of conception. That's genetic conditioning. And then again, we were surrounded and we had all of these ideas planted in our mind when we were just infants. Now, our subconscious mind is literally filled with all kinds of ridiculous information. The people that gave it to us didn't think it was ridiculous at the time they gave it to us. Nevertheless, it was. Everyone believing a lie is the truth does not make it the truth. So we've got all these ideas fixed in our subconscious mind. Now, Let's visualize this beautiful energy flowing into our consciousness. We can make anything out of it we choose. And what do? Well, we make thoughts that are in harmony with our old conditioning. Earl went on to say that preparation is the key. This means becoming so good, so competent at what we're now doing, we'll actually force the opportunities we seek to come our way. Well, I don't know about you, but Earl Nightingale's comments were right on the money when he said preparation was the key. The preparation that is required is altering our paradigm, and we can begin by understanding the degree to which our paradigms influence our perception as well as our choice of thoughts. We will revisit this concept of paradigms and how they're altered. However, before we do, let's continue with Earl Nightingale's thoughts on greener pastures. It takes imagination, creative imagination, to know that diamonds don't look like diamonds in their rough state, nor does a pile of iron ore look like iron or steel. Great opportunities lurk constantly in every aspect of the work in which we now find ourselves. In order to begin prospecting your acres of diamonds, start to develop a faculty called intelligent objectivity. The ability to stand off and look at your job as a stranger might. A stranger who considers your pasture greener than his own. To do this, start at the beginning. What industry or profession does your job fall? Do you know all you can know about your industry? How did it begin? Why did it begin? Who started it and when? What is your industry's annual dollar volume? How fast has it grown during the past 20 years? What's its projected growth during the next 10 years? Did you know that many industries will double in size during the next 8 years? This takes only a 10% gain per year. In short, start now to become a student of your industry. You'll be amazed at the results. In 5 years or less, you can become a national expert in your field, and it's the experts who write their own tickets in life. Just think of this for a moment. If you can see no limit to the growth of your industry, doesn't it make sense to realize that there's no limit as to how far you can progress within its framework? Surveys indicate that the great majority of people seem to look at their jobs as being as far as they can go, as the end of the line. Why? They need to realize how really desperately an expanding and dynamic industry needs and seeks the uncommon person who's prepared to share in its growth. How richly it will reward this person of vision and action. On the other hand, those who are not preparing and growing are just not standing still. In relation to their industry, they're going backwards. So ask yourself, do I know as much about my job and my industry as a good doctor or lawyer knows about their job, their profession? You should, you know. This is the attitude of the person who wants to become a professional at what he does for a living. It's far more fun, many times more rewarding and interesting, and the real pro can ride out occasional storms in the economic seas in a safe boat built of research and preparation. In order to become a professional in the world of amateurs, we need to study 3 important subjects. 1, our company and the industry in which it operates. 2, our job and perhaps the next step upward in our career. 3, we need to study people, since successfully serving and getting along with people will determine our success or failure. These are 3 subjects on which you can gradually build a fine home library. Your bookstore clerk will help you find the right books if you'll tell them what you want to know. Frequently, all you need in order to make an enormous improvement is simply a reminder of things you've known but have forgotten. Isn't that the truth? Let's stop and think of what Earl was saying to us. I'm certain you'll agree the further we go in exploring this lesson, the more obvious it becomes that we must alter our old paradigms and begin taking advantage of opportunities. To alter your paradigm, you must be going after something you really want. The late Dr. Ken McFarland was often quoted as saying, "All things are possible if the motivation is strong enough." Altering paradigms is a very personal thing and requires a respectable amount of motivation along with understanding. The motivation comes from seeing ourselves in a much better position than we are now. At this point, I want to suggest you follow Earl Nightingale's recommendations and complete the exercises covering the 3 points that Earl Nightingale suggested would help you become more professional. You'll find these in your management guide. Remember what he was talking about, your company. Take the time to sit down and describe the improved position you would like to see your company in 2 years from now. Think about your job. Now, if you own your own company, this would relate to your own personal position. State the circumstances you would like to see yourself working in 2 years from now. And number 3, people. You know individuals who have an incredible understanding of people and how to work with them. Develop an affirmation, a positive statement from yourself to yourself, describing yourself with all the people skills in your personality that individual has in theirs. Now let's return to Earl Nightingale's words. He said, perhaps this study and research in your job, your industry, and ways of increasing your service to others sounds like a big job. It is, but it's fascinating. And in the long run, it pays tremendous dividends, builds confidence and complete security. And it can be accomplished in an hour a day, devoted to reading and making permanent notes, studying, 1 book or 1 article at a time, an hour each day, will lead to your becoming an expert at your particular job and industry in 5 years or less. The hours add up, 1 at a time, like the great stones of a pyramid, building a strong and permanent foundation which raises you a layer at a time toward the goal you seek. Each morning as you get ready for work, ask yourself this question: how can I increase my service today? Then, during the hour a day you set aside for study and research, make notes and think about your industry, about your job and company, and about people. You'll gradually begin to get better and better ideas for improving your service. Remember these words: no person can become rich without enriching others. Anyone who adds to prosperity must prosper in return. Think of ways and means by which you can increase your contribution to your company, your industry, and those whom you serve. You'll begin to notice a wonderful change in your world, for as ye sow, so shall ye reap. The minute you adopt this attitude, you've joined the top 5% of the people in the world. You've virtually removed all competition. You're creating rather than competing. You're affecting life rather than being affected by it. You are becoming a creator. By taking this attitude toward your work, your company, and your industry, you're automatically taking care of 2 vital parts of successful living. First, you'll find yourself becoming more interested and enthusiastic about your work and its future, and both interest and enthusiasm are contagious. And second, you're building financial security, which will last a lifetime. So keep this thought in mind as often as you can, on and off the job. Somewhere in your present work, there lurks an opportunity which will bring you everything you could possibly want for yourself and your family. It will not be labeled opportunity. It will be hidden in common everyday garments, just as was the hairpin with which a man fashioned the first paperclip, or the dirty drinking glass which triggered the paper cup industry. Now, in closing, here are 12 points to remember. 1. If we'll develop the wisdom and patience to intelligently and effectively explore the work in which we're now engaged, we will very likely find it contains the riches, tangible and intangible, we seek. 2. Before we go running off into what we think are greener pastures, let's realize our own pasture is probably unlimited. 3. There are no bad jobs. It's the way in which we go about our work that makes it good or bad. 4. Let's not poke ourselves into jugs beyond which we cannot grow. Let's avoid self-limitation. 5. Only preparation can ensure our taking advantage of the opportunities which will present themselves in the future. Opportunities which are around us now. Let's begin to prepare now. 6. Put your imagination to work on the many ways and means of improving what you are now doing. 7. Learn all you can about your job, your company, and your industry. 8. Since there's no limit to the growth of your industry, it must follow there is similarly no limit to your growth potential within that industry. 9. Our dynamic and growing economy needs and will well reward the uncommon person who prepares for a place in its growth. 10. Begin to build your library of reference material pertaining to your company, industry, job, and how to better serve and get along with people. 11. Set aside an hour a day for this study and research. 12. Remember the story of the acres of diamonds.